Well, hello and welcome to Covestro Live. Thanks for joining us. Today we'll explore the vibrant world of sustainability. We'll look at clever circular economy solutions, uncover net zero strategies and learn insights from visionary experts shaping the world that runs in loops. Don't miss out, join us. Yes, hello everyone and welcome back to Covestro Live. I'm Niko Palosuo and I'm thrilled to be your host today. This broadcast is all about scaling circular solutions. Solutions that may have been researched already quite a bit and may be piloted, but not yet in extensive use. I am joined by three incredible experts. Let me bring them already online. Experts who are shaping the world of sustainability. We have Eva Gladek, founder and CEO of Metabolic, live from Amsterdam. Hello, Eva. Good to see you. Welcome.
Hi there. Nice to be here.
And we have Carus, a leading voice in renewable carbon economy. Hi, Michael. Good to see you.
Hi.
And last but not least, Amanda Martin, who works as communications lead for Global Impact Coalition in Switzerland. Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
As we can see, Charlie Tan, who was announced at the broadcast, he had to take care of family. So thanks, Amanda, for stepping in his place.
Thank you.
So we have a fantastic trio with us today. Eva is renowned for her systems thinking approach to circular economies. Michael brings in deep insights from renewable carbon. And Amanda can reflect how the industry is really driving transformative solutions within the many companies of the coalition. Our goal today is to explore how we can build a more sustainable world with circular solutions. And we'll hopefully dive into more practical solutions, big ideas, and why this matters to all of us. And you, dear audience, you are a part of this conversation too. So feel free to drop in your questions, comments, protests, or ideas in the social chat on LinkedIn or YouTube. We'll see them in the studio and to respond to as many as we can during the broadcast. We're also using Slido for polling with the hashtag Green Week. And the first poll is already live. We are asking you, what is essential for the future of the circular economy? Share your thoughts and let's get started. So let's begin by talking about how to make the circular economy viable and competitive, because we know recycling infrastructure, availability of alternative raw materials, demand generation, significant challenges remain. So Eva, let's start with you, live from Amsterdam. Eva, can you explain to our audience a little bit, why does the vision of a circular and sustainable economy require systems thinking? I have seen you with a Rubik's Cube around, so maybe you can explain a little bit about the system side of things.
I don't know how many of you have been following the evolution of the sustainability field as a whole, but over the last 5 years, increasingly people have been talking about the importance of systems. And I do use the Rubik's Cube as an important kind of metaphor, because when you're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube puzzle and you want to move one square to the other side where it belongs, you end up scrambling the whole puzzle unless you understand that it's an algorithm that needs to be uncovered. And in sustainability, many of the different outcomes that we're trying to achieve, such as climate outcomes, health outcomes, biodiversity, and circular economy are all interconnected. Many of the problems that are leading to bad outcomes in different areas stem from common root causes. So we need to understand those root causes to be able to generate solutions across the whole. And that is also very much applicable to the circular economy. So in terms of a systems lens, a lot of people tend to think about circularity just in terms of recycling and end of pipe solutions. So how do we solve the total large amounts of waste that we have, and the fact that we have less than 10% of that material that we're putting through the economy beneficially coming into reuse processes and into new product lives? And actually, ultimately, you have to look at the entire system, at the way that products are designed, at the way that materials are extracted, and how much we're taking from natural systems and what those carrying capacities are for those systems, how products are going to be used or misused by consumers. You can design a perfectly circular product even with just the product in mind, but if you don't consider the infrastructure that it's going to be put into, then that doesn't count, right? We need to be looking across life cycles, across multiple lifespans of value. So these are all different ways of looking at that Rubik's Cube as a whole, thinking of this as a systemic challenge. And I think the first step is that circular economy is not just about recycling. It really is looking at that whole life cycle and starting with the way that we're designing products so that it actually is feasible to collect those products, and also designing them in dialogue with different parts of the value chain. So if you're designing a product, talking to the waste collectors and processors that are likely to end up with that product, creating shared business models where different types of value can be extracted across the chain by different parties, so that you build in incentives to make that circularity set of circular solutions feasible.
Thanks, Eva. I actually asked AI, because I will ask AI a lot of stuff. I asked AI to produce a Rubik's Cube based on circular thinking and systems thinking, and this is what came up in Amsterdam. I will ask you later about what you think about AI anyway, because many people claim that AI will be the solution to everything. But let's see. But it's super good to hear that thinking that this is a sustainable product is not enough. It's the system that's either is or isn't sustainable. Michael, let's go to you. I know you have been talking a lot about how to increase, how to make the market work for circular products. Can you explain a little bit about the demand generation side? What can we do to increase the market demand for more circular products?
Yeah, please allow me first to describe a little bit our renewable carbon concept. We hear often that we need a low carbon economy or or free of carbon economy. This is all fine for the energy sector, where we can do almost everything with electricity from solar and wind and hydro. But when it comes to the chemical and material sector, we need another solution. Here we need carbon. Carbon is in almost all our products and also in our bodies. And the question is what carbon we use. And so far in our society, in our economy, we're using mainly fossil carbon from the ground. So we're extracting carbon in the form of crude oil, natural gas, and coal, making our product from it or our fuels, and finally it's ending up as CO2 in the atmosphere. And this, of course, is not a cycle. This is not at all a cycle, and this is the main cause for climate change. So we have to do here, the only way here in the material sector is to replace this fossil linear carbon by other carbon sources which can run in a cycle. And we have here recycling, as you mentioned, as an important part of the story, a very important part of the story, and also biomass and CO2 utilization. Perhaps we can talk later about this other two also. But further idea is to keep the carbon in the cycle. And that means, when you ask me for demand creation, we need to create demand for these alternative carbon sources. Yeah, this picture shows very well. This is a picture where you see recycling is here on a very, very, very high level. As you heard before, today it's more 10%, but even if we have a perfect recycling world, a perfect system, we can maximum keep something like 75%, 70% carbon in the recycling cycle. And then we have to add additional carbon for our products, and this carbon should not come from the ground, not from fossil. It should come from bio or from CO2. And the idea of demand creation is that we, for solution based on recycled carbon, on biocarbon, on CO2-based carbon, we have to create demand for those solutions. We are very good in Europe in research development, in making pilot plants, demo plants, but the scaling up is often not working at all. And this the reason is we need here demand for products using other carbon sources. This can be created by policy, for example, with quotas that we say the Commission in Brussels already had some proposals a few years ago on that perhaps all chemicals and plastics and other materials using carbon have to use at least 20% renewable carbon from recycling, bio or CO2. This would create a huge market demand, and we see this have worked very well in the fuel sector, but in the chemical material sector we have so far no demand creation, but this will hopefully come the next years. Otherwise, I don't think we can really scale up. And another important point mentioned very shortly, we can discuss it further, is demand creation and to have a clear and stable framework in legislation that companies know in which technologies they can invest. But I think you have later more questions on this too.
Thanks, Michael. Really important points. And clearly, if the economic equation does not work, we will not see success. And coming to the economic point, Amanda, let's go to you because the Global Impact Coalition has been now for a while, at least I think a little bit over a year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, building that industry collaboration and solving the puzzle of making sure that the end product is more sustainable and less resource efficient as previous ones. So Amanda, maybe you can explain to us a little bit about what the Global Impact Alliance is doing in this respect.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. So basically, just to give you a little bit of an overview, the Global Impact Coalition has been now about a year and a half since we spun out from the World Economic Forum, where we were incubated for a few years. And basically, we are bringing together some of the world's leaders in chemicals and recycling. So our members include Covestro and other recycling end-of-life companies like Suez, along with many other chemical companies. And we are working really globally to bring together these companies to actively think about how we can solve some of the issues around scaling circularity and reducing carbon emissions. So one of our beliefs around how to really advance on the circular economy is to really to advance on collaboration and integration. This means helping to de-risk and scale technologies, also helping to collectively get more investment. So this is really the founding principle for how we operate, is that if each individual company is working on these topics, they're not going to be able to advance. We need to bring these companies together so that we can collectively have a greater sources and to find some of the solutions for these challenges. For example, and some of our projects, and one of them I think is shows the greatest examples of this, of how we're really bringing companies together. It's our project around automotive plastic circularity. In the automotive industry today, over 80% of plastics are landfilled or incinerated in Europe alone. So in other parts of the world, it's even worse, I'm sure, this percentage. And basically the reason is there's no value for these plastics. But there is a value for the plastics. It's just that it's not been recognized as a valuable material. So what we're doing is actually bringing together these parts of the value chain into a loop, right? So having these people speak to each other, from the end-of-life vehicles to the chemical companies that are taking this material to recycle it and to put it back into the system. And it's amazing just having these two groups of people come together to speak and translate, we need this type of polymer. Oh, that's an important type of polymer. We didn't realize that this had value. Let's work together to find a way to actually collect, sort, shred, and recycle in a way that you can use and keep the carbon value in these different types of polymers. So this is, I think, a great example of how, in many cases, our systems are set up in such a linear way that we don't have people speaking to each other. We don't have this connection point, and therefore we don't show the value that's needed across all of the different parts of the chain, and to keep, as Michael was saying, keep the carbon in the system. And I love, Eva, your Rubik's Cube analogy. It's like, how do we find this, find the algorithm? But I think in a big part, and sort of also my role, is in communicating that algorithm. So once one person or a few people understand it, how can you share that so that everybody can, collectively make the Rubik's Cube?
Thanks, Amanda. And I can confirm that the industry has so many different projects and initiatives to make recycling more easy and to be able to produce products which are simpler to recycle or have been produced to a great degree with recyclable products. Here I can show my shameless plug from Covestro, which is an automotive headlamp. So this is a good example of a monomaterial. This is a headlamp you would see in any vehicle, but the difference is that this is completely polycarbonate. So when you recycle this headlamp, it's super easy to recycle because it is made only of really one material and different grades of polycarbonates. And the special aspect of this is that it's also laser welded, so there are even no adhesives in it. So recycling is going to be easier. That's the end of my shameless plug. Let's talk a little bit, let's see a little bit about what our audience is saying to the question I posed earlier, and to get your commentary on it. Let me just put it on screen. Here we go. So the audience is saying, what is essential for the future of circular economy? This is what we have so far. You guys wanna comment? Is this the essential need for the future, to have a functioning circular economy?
Well, definitely parts of it. Oh, Michael, do you want to go?
No. You have the floor. No problem.
Go ahead, Eva.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly some of these, but there are other issues as well. So as Michael mentioned, policy in Europe is a really huge lever as well. And this year is actually quite significant in the European policy space, because the process in the Commission is just starting to reform the CAP, which is this big, hairy package of incentives and structures around agriculture, but also the bioeconomy policy is getting revised this year. And something I wanted to mention, a bit of an elephant in the room, is that yes, we can design everything in the world to be as circular as possible to re-enter the system. But because we're overall growing and the volume of products that we're consuming is increasing, also partly driven by population growth, even if you circularize everything, we've done these studies, for example, for the built environment. Like if you could capture all the residual materials coming from the built environment and put them back into the system, you can only, in that situation in Europe, cover 16% of the material demand because of that growth and because of the poor design of past systems. So we need to actively be doing these cooperative value chain processes that you've described that you're doing, Amanda, which is amazing. So that the future material streams that are coming out are less, are more compatible. We need to really work on making sure the policy incentives are driving us in the right direction. And ultimately, we actually need to recognize that the total throughput of material is just too high. So actually, we need to look at demand side reduction strategies that are compatible with business models for companies that are operating today. And that's one of the biggest nuts to crack, actually, because we can't just keep increasing the total volume of throughput. And that really connects also to the bioeconomy piece. We've done a lot of research on if you went entirely bio-based, for example, for the built environment, what would you need? And in Europe, we would need a harvestable area the size of Finland of additional wood to be able to support that, to create a major carbon sink across the built environment. And the forests are just not healthy because they're also getting pressured from climate change, species migrations, et cetera. So there's all of these intersecting problems. And also we're burning half of the wood that we're harvesting, which is a ridiculous use for that carbon, actually. We should be putting that into products and really figuring out ways to durably store it. So there's all of these different intersecting issues that some of those are reflected certainly in that slide.
Thanks, Eva. Michael, you want to?
Yeah, I think these keywords are very helpful, and so thanks to the audience. I will quickly go through them. I think we heard from Amanda already about cooperation, from Eva about social change. So I will more focus on the other points here. Speed, for example. We are very slow in Europe, and the waste problem, the keeping carbon in the cycle, is an urgent issue. And so we need to speed up the whole policy framework processes and giving the companies a market perspective. I think we will also have in the future a lot of mixed waste and products made from different plastics and polymers. And also when you see the limitation of mechanical recycling concerning the quality of the polymers, it's pretty clear that we need chemical recycling, especially when we want to go up to keeping about 30, 40 or up to 70% in the cycle. We need also chemical recycling. And here we have a lot of research done in Europe, so research is well done. But the market perspective is still unclear. And so that means in the policy framework, we have to clearly define which kind of chemical recycling is accepted from policymakers. We have now in the first areas like packaging waste and automotive, we have some quotas. This nice picture shows a wide range of chemical recycling, also physical recycling. Dissolution means cleaning up the polymers. Depolymerization means going back to monomers to then make virgin-like new polymers with highest quality. Pyrolysis means to make from the mixed waste pyrolysis oil and naphtha. Gasification makes syngas as a feedstock for the chemical industry, and incineration with CO2 capture is also in some cases a solution. And today it's not clear from policy which kind of recycling technology they are really accepting in the quota of packaging and plain waste regulation. And also for some experts here, we also need acceptance for mass balance approach because we can't realize an input fully from recycled materials. We need a mixture in the period in between, we need a mixture between fossil and recycled products. And that means also that we allow the industry some attribution of the recycled shares. And in this area, we have not a clear framework so far. Commission is working since years on that, and it can happen, as Eva said, this year is very important, that this year some final decisions will be taken. But they are very important for investment, and we need a lot more investment in chemical recycling plants. We have here only a very few, and the scale is much too low. And we see, when we look to US policy at the moment, if you have a not unstable framework, nobody is investing. And it's the same in the chemical recycling. And I'm pretty sure as soon as quotas are there, demand is created, legislation is clear what is accepted, we can use mass balance approach, then we will see in Europe huge investment in chemical recycling plants. And the share today we recycle in Europe something like 10% of the polymers. I think then we can very soon go up to 15, 20, 30%. And so this stable, clear framework is so important for investment.
Michael, can I just quickly ask, do you feel like that's the policy side is the most important barrier to achieving the financial viability of larger scale chemical recycling? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure for that. We are in contact to many companies which are planning investment, and we also tracking all chemical recycling plants in the world. We update this every year. We're just building a database about all chemical plants in the world, and we see that in Asia and US there's much more investment, and here they're just waiting for final decisions. And I'm pretty sure that because also when we keep in the carbon cycle, we are so depending today from fossil imports from Russia, from Middle East, and when we can, and we're also exporting still some of the plastic waste, and when we can keep the things in Europe and close the cycle, it would be so important not only for circular economy, also for not being so dependent on crude oil imports. That I think there is a great will to go this pathway. But so far the framework is not clear. So it's really a high risk. We see some companies starting investment, and I ask them, are you really sure to invest now? You are not sure about the framework. And I say, yeah, it's a high risk to invest now, but we are pretty sure the right framework will come. But other companies in such a situation just waiting. And so I think this year, when we are able this year to make final decisions here, I'm pretty sure that investment will follow very, very soon in combination with the demand creation. We started in packaging and automotive, other sectors will follow. Textile sector is an important sector here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there will be, and we need also new chemical infrastructure in Europe because the cracker system is decreasing here. So that would be a great opportunity for circular economy, less dependency on crude oil countries, and also new jobs and investment in chemical infrastructure.
Just maybe to, could I just jump in on a couple of those
Please,
points?
Amanda. And I was going to ask you, because we see now the market perspectives from all sides, also from the audience, and I'm sure your members in the Global Impact Coalition are also looking at this aspect. So what are your members saying?
Yeah, so just a few points there that Michael touched on, I think are top of mind for all the discussions we're having now, especially in the chemical industry. And now also we're really looking to move more toward this demand aggregation. The chemical industry is ultimately feeding the demand and the ask from further downstream. So what we're also working on doing now is really engaging across the value chain, and especially looking at consumer goods companies that I think are under a lot of pressure. And this is where it all kind of comes together with some of the regulations as well. So they're under pressure to set, to meet, to advance on targets, to have more recycled content, to have products that are fully recycled, the packaging is fully recyclable, to also have their climate targets. And without the systems in place that can account for such especially even mass balance and chemical recycling and alignment around these frameworks, it's very difficult for them to justify the investments and also the kind of aggregate the demand needed for the chemical industry to then make those investments. So this is something that we've worked on, especially in the last year. Speaking about pyrolysis, it's, I think, part of a suite of different types of recycling that we need to really advance on this. And part of the issue is the fact that it's very complicated for a lot of these smaller pyrolysis players to come into the market and to really be able to understand all of the different regulations. If you're in Germany, but you need to transport or collect waste from another country, there's very specific regulations around this transportation of waste and around what's needed. And then each chemical company has their own specifications around the type of pyrolysis oil that they need and how they can use that. So really, it's a very complex system, and the lack of clarity and alignment on regulation is not helping. And as well, it's, in this current situation right now, the chemical industry is facing a lot of challenges with the oversupply in Europe specifically, and we see, Asia has really far surpassed in terms of their ability to scale up some of these things when it comes to also going from the waste collection and recycling all the way to the chemical production.
Thanks, Amanda. I think it's great that you bring these points up and then I think now we are at the heart of how to scale circular solutions, because without these aspects, it won't scale, or at least it won't scale fast enough to be competitive, especially from the European perspective. Thank you, our dear audience, for yes.
I would also like to put another puzzle piece from Eva's view in the discussion, because another issue for the chemical industry is that they should defossilize. When we're looking to a lot of reports on net zero chemical industry 2050, there is no way to avoid defossilization, to go from, for example, from crude oil naphtha to other naphtha sources. And so when we make this chemical recycling, it's not only to keep carbon in the loop, it's also that we give the chemical industry a solution to defossilize. And that would mean, for example, when we have a regulation that 20% of the naphtha used in cracker in Europe has to be renewable from recycling, bio or CO2, that also creating demand for this circular solutions, that some waste streams we cannot use for depolymerization or mechanical recycling then can be turned to naphtha, and giving the chemical industry the opportunity to stay with the infrastructure they have, but have another feedstock, not anymore crude oil naphtha, but other naphtha sources. And here, this is another puzzle piece in this big system. But we need, I think we need to have regulations at many places. And you asked at the beginning about AI. The AI can help to understand the full picture, because we have so many components working together, and when we're starting here some regulations, here some quotas, it's not clear whether it fits finally together. And here I think IA can really help a lot to find solutions which are really constructive, cooperative, working together, and find a pathway in the future.
Perfect, Mike. We can ask AI to read through all the regulations, and then for the governments to propose a policy path to fix the issues, and then for the companies to come up with a business strategy. Maybe I'm a little bit oversimplifying this. Let's go to the second question, because I want to touch on globality and the global part of the equation a little bit, to zoom out of Europe a little bit. Before we go there, the next Slido question is up for our audience. Thank you very much for already giving your insights and commentary. Now we are asking, what is the most significant barrier to achieving circular economy in your industry? Because I know in our audience we have various industries who are looking at this and seeing how can they become more circular. So let's see what the audience will say to that regard. Thank you already for pitching in your commentary. So to come back to the global perspective, the global circularity rate, I think, is 6.9% or something like that. It is a slow progress. So Eva, I want to come back, because you are working all over the world with urban environment, cities, places. The world is urbanizing. How can these, well, cities or areas provide the same kind of value to their citizens with fewer resources?
Yeah, thanks, Niko. So indeed, as Metabolic, we have a few main pillars of work historically, and from the very start, we've looked at how to intervene at the level of places. And initially, so when we started 13 years ago, we built one of the first circular economy living labs in the city of Amsterdam, took a polluted brownfield, upcycled houseboats that were going to be demolished, so recycled whole buildings, put them on the ground, and then really created this testing environment for urban material flows and how you could circularize them as much as possible. And this has been running as this kind of small experiment for the last 13 years. But from that experiment, we proceeded to develop whole city strategies for moving toward a circular economy, really looking at different types of value chains. And we've seen over and over again, so we would start by doing a baseline, all the material flows in and out of a city, where are those getting stuck, what's happening with them, and then developing strategies for moving from that state to a fully circular state. And of course, that starts to involve companies, because where are those materials coming from? They're coming from products that are being consumed by people, that are being purchased. And we ran into the fact that when you start working at just like parts of the value chain, just with companies on products, or just with cities on their strategy, or just with NGOs who are advocating for behavior change, you run into a dead end at each point. And so we started to really come up with this whole place-based transformation approach, really looking at how do you structure investment in regional transitions to circularity, to create portfolios that really look at catchment areas for materials and the value chains within those areas, to design whole circular transitions. So for example, right now we're working on a project in the United States where we're looking at the whole Appalachian bioregion, where there's a history of textile production, there's quite a lot of forestry, and so a history of also production of furniture, et cetera. And we're looking at designing a whole regional transition strategy for circularity outcomes that also looks at what types of manufacturing industries are there, how do you strengthen those, how do you fill gaps in the value chains that you're identifying there, to also, for example, centering chemical recycling, really looking at like that entire value chain, how linear is it right now, where are the gaps to make it circular, and how can you bring a portfolio of investment to support that. I think that approach works also very well with the way that Amanda, that you and GIC are working on negotiating between value chain actors. So this is the kind of thing that we've come to the conclusion that, to break through these different stalemates, you need to work at that whole place level. And yes, center cities as consumers, but not just cities, also looking at the rural areas where things are produced, where there's also room for industry. So coming up with these coherent plans. That's one of our key conclusions. And it has to do with also financial innovation, I would say, because normal financial instruments, I would say that for a lot of people, money is the barrier, right? How do you get money to the investments in these areas? And this is why we're also looking at these place-based portfolios.
I think that's fascinating. Our studio is in Pennsylvania, in the middle of the forest. Well, not in the middle of the forest, but in Pittsburgh. And actually, I'm going next week to visit an electronics recycler in State College, which is truly in the middle of the forest. And you can have truly innovative pieces of the puzzle working in fairly remote areas if all the conditions for the operations are right and are helping helping the process. And this is something I want to ask you, Michael. I have this is the action plan for the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, and as I read through it, what is your thinking about? Would this be also a global blueprint for circular progress?
Yeah, I think the Bioeconomy Action Plan. We have in the last 10-15 years so many bioeconomic action plans in Europe. I think Germany has about 2 or 3 meters action plans. We need implementation. We need market creation. This is the key. So of course, in all these plans, there are many things that are true, but in the past, there often was coming up to from. I give you one very nice example you can easy understand. We know a company in Estonia. They're producing asphalt from lignin. Yeah, that was a research topic over 20 years. Now they're offering this asphalt on the market, and everything is fine. They have won 5 awards, and they have a pilot, a demo. Everything's fine. But now they try to sell it on the market. And this alternative asphalt costs 2-3 times more than the standard. They're going to all cities in Sweden and Finland, and nobody wants it. Because the cities said we have no money, we have no budget, it's a little bit more complicated, it's more costly, and we have not to do it. So the companies say, yeah, we will not survive the next 5 years. On the other hand, the company is saying, if there would be a quota for alternative asphalt, we would be the kings. We could build one biorefinery after the other. And this, I think, is the key that we need for all the good ideas, for the good things we have developed the last years worldwide, globally. We need really create a demand, because they cannot compete with the fossil system, which is optimized over 100 years, with is not paying any tax for the fossil carbon, in contrast to the fuel sector. So it's almost not possible to compete with new solutions. We see at the moment the only driver for new products, bio-based products, for example, coming from some brand owners in some sectors, pharmaceutical, some fine chemical, body care products, or some companies say we have such a big margin, we can pay a little bit more. But this is very limited. And when we want to go the next step, then we need demand creation. And we saw what's happening in the biofuel sector, whether you like it or not, or the sustainable aviation fuel sector. Here it really works. There we have quota systems all over the world, in Brazil, in Asia, in Europe, in US. And if you create such a new market, then you see innovation and investment. And the new bioeconomy plan is here still very weak. And so I have tomorrow and also next week several meetings with the Commission to convince that they have to do a little bit more to make it work. Yeah?
Can I just say one really quick thing? So,
of course.
One of the things that Metabolic has co-founded is something called the Systems Transformation Hub, which is a group of organizations focused on bringing a systemic lens to policy in Europe. And I just wanted to share that if anyone is interested, we're hosting several dialogues on systemic approaches to optimizing land use, on circularity, et cetera. So just for my co-panelists and anyone in the audience, because these are actively things we're working on this year. So.
Thanks, Eva. And we can clearly see already from the audience, I think this is also reflecting what you have said before. There are indeed barriers to make circular solutions fly on the policy side and also on the financing side. So definitely something that all parts of the puzzle need to look at to make it work overall. I'm happy to see that we have so many questions also from the audience. This is great that there is more and more interest, because actually I do want to go to the topic of the role of the consumers, because we have now talked about the industries, what they can do, the policymakers. If we are now looking at the consumers, what will it take for consumers to embrace circularity? Do we see that already today at a sufficient pace, or are we kind of stuck in the linear thinking? I know, Eva, you have been looking at this a lot, but maybe Amanda, let's start with you, because you work with companies who need to earn money and need to be profitable. So how do you see the consumer's role in this?
Yeah, I think it's, I've worked with many different consumer goods companies over the past years, also on sustainability topics. And I think it's a matter of course, it's education and awareness, but ultimately it's making it relevant for people in their personal lives. So I think the more, even though we are living in a global interconnected world, the more you can actually bring it to a local and personal story and narrative and kind of approach, I think it's much more effective. So ultimately, people care about their family, about their community, about where they live. So even thinking about small steps of you're not going to just throw garbage around where you live. You're going to think about how can you care for that place, how can you care for the environment, the trees around, everything that's around in your personal space, and trying to make that connection with how we are responsibly consuming and taking and treating the products that we use at the end of life. Also, I see more and more a shift in the mentality, and I think it's great that we start to see that it suddenly is becoming more cool to wear secondhand clothes, to you have more and more of these networks where people can exchange and give products and a second life, a third life, a fourth life, because many of the products that we have today, I mean, they're designed to last for many years, but people are changing them all the time, right? Look at how often people change their technology, right? Their cell phones, clothes, all of this. So I think a lot of it is shift in mindset and talking about quality over just quantity, and thinking about how we can appreciate and reuse and keep in the system and in an active life, let's say, so many of the products that we use every day.
Thanks, Amanda.
I'm not so optimistic concerning the reduction of the consumer demand. I would prefer a system solution that the consumer can continue consuming, and we have a perfect collection, separating, and recycling system behind. We are today in a very special situation if you look into the humankind of the last thousands of years, because in the last 50 to 80 years, it was a big change. Before, material was always rare. So if you have textiles or some consumer goods, you try to keep them over 10, 15, 20 years. Even in the past, some textiles was used over generations, because we had always bottleneck in supply of material. And with the invention of the modern chemical industry, plastic industry, injection molding, for example, we are today, because of the increased efficiency, it's so easy to have overproduction. So we have almost everywhere overproduction. So we can produce parts in the past we need for some parts 1 hour in production. Now we need 1 second. And so we have everywhere overproduction. And that means we have to sell the products. We need strong marketing. And we try to have very fast cycles, look to textiles or consumer goods. And it's not easy to break through this cycle, because the efficiency will even increase, and it will be easier in the future to make overproduction, and the different regions fight each other in overproduction. So I think this is not easy to handle. If you look to reports for the demand for carbon in the chemical and plastic industry till 2050, most forecasts saying we will have double or triple demand in 2050 compared to today. And can the consumer really change this? Is a big question. And I think if we have very modern systems in place, we see this also in different countries, it's handled a different way. In Germany, we ask the people to have 4 or 5 bins and try to make the selection at home. In France, they have mainly 1 bin, and the selection takes place later in a recycling factory. So I think, why not train the consumer to bring everything, of course, in a collection system, but do the work with modern technologies that we can separate metals, we can separate the bio-waste, the different polymers. We are able today also to make a pile of all different polymers and do a very sophisticated way to handle the waste and keep it in the loop. But I think this is more the job of the whole system, and also partly of the design, but to tell the consumer in our efficient world with this strong marketing to consume less on global level. That will be not easy at all, especially because most people on the world have much lower consumption than what we see in Europe or US, and they have also the right to come closer to our consumption. If you have 1 t-shirt, you want to have 20 t-shirts. So I think it is naive to think that we can really reduce the demand. The demand will globally double or triple, but we have to handle this in the most clever way we can. And we have the solutions there. We have just to implement them.
Can I quickly respond?
Please, Eva. I was going to ask you anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I think this is a really central and interesting debate. And Michael, I have to agree with you in general. I don't think that we should be putting the problem, the burden on consumers, because it just requires also such a huge amount of information transfer and time. And, we want to create the system that can seamlessly absorb these issues, and that is, where the products that are being put out into the system are not killing you or poisoning the world, and that they're easy to reabsorb in a very clean, streamlined way back into the system, right? But at the same time, I think the problem that you're mentioning around overproduction highlights another core issue. So in 2020, there was this very famous statistic that came out, I think, in a paper in Nature, that for the first time in human history, the amount of man-made material on the planet exceeded the amount of natural material, right? So it was this kind of really weird milestone. And I actually think that that's a problem. And I think that the amount of throughput of cheap material that then is being forced into different production systems. We've worked a lot in the dairy sector. We have like dairy companies calling us and being like, hey, do you know where we can offload more milk? Like, can we just put it into more products? Tricking people to use it for like nutrition for infants, which is not a good idea either. There's like that whole history of just needing to offload cheap product. That's not good for companies either, because it's a race to the bottom with products that should be valuable, well designed, designed for good purpose. So I think there's a lot of rethinking about the fundamental business models behind these in key sectors. How do you make sure that you're not trying to push just more stuff through the system, and making sure that people have enough, that they have choice, that they're able to that things can be recovered, but that there's not this kind of, because there's been a whole history of implanting paranoid, massive consumerism because of this problem of too much stuff. But that's not what we need. I think we need to just, we need to have choice, sufficiency, or, enough stuff that can easily go back into the system. So I would ideally love to see, and of course, consumption rates need to increase across the global south and global majority countries, or however you say this. We need to match this with massive increases in energy. We haven't really talked about AI, but a lot of this actually has a huge footprint on land, energy demand, et cetera. That's another consequence of increasing material footprint. So I do think we really need to take the demand side question seriously, but holistically, and all look at it together, companies as well. How do you stop a race to the bottom business model where you're just producing more crap that no one wants and forcing them to want it? Like, we need to, look at it a little differently. Sorry, just...
One very quick comment. We all can here agree in more things. But when we see, for example, this export of Temu from China to the Western world, it's a disaster. But our young generation love it. To buy for €5, €7, million tons of stuff. So this volume is increasing at the moment. And tell those people they're doing a wrong thing, they are so happy with that.
They're not happy, they're depressed. Like 50% of young people have depression. And that's why they're buying stuff. This is a more structural problem.
The scrolling and the buying, that's all going together.
And rates of loneliness, suicide, depression, like a third of the American population is medicated for mental health issues. This is not an okay situation anymore.
So this is fantastic. Now we have, I think, truly reached the root causes of what is needed to scale circular solutions, because we have aspected the mental side of this. As somebody from Finland loving the simple life, I know that stuff doesn't make you happy. It is the holistic life in general. So amazing stuff. I think now we have really covered all the angles of what it takes to scale circular solutions. Every part of the industry has its place, and everybody has to do its part to make sure that the planet is not over-consuming its resources. So we are reaching the end of our broadcast time slot. Thank you very much. Sorry for not being able to. Is there something in the question chat, my dear panelists, that you would like to touch upon before we close? Thank you.
I'm just aware, Niko, that I can't respond to any of those chat things, and someone has asked about the Systems Transformation Hub. But I imagine that you'd be able to send them an information after.
But I have ever comment, Niko, to what you just said. It's also a question whether really we have limited resources. I think when we use solar energy, we can produce 100 times more energy than today. You can make from energy via CO2 utilization materials and resources. So just the story, we're running out of resources and we have to change everything with a modern CCU system. And then, not that I like it or I would propose it, but it will be possible to have much more resources for use in the industry than we have today, just when we're turning solar in materials, and that is possible. And so this limitation is not coming automatically. We have to decide for this limitation. It will not come automatically. That is an important point.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to the audience again for actively. We are of course able to follow up on the chat. Special thanks to Zios with big and small Zs for being active, bringing and voicing out your points. I think they very well reflect what our dear panelists have been saying. So we are running at the end of our broadcast time. Thank you so much, Eva, Michael, and Amanda for sharing your insights and expertise. I think today's discussion has shown that it takes collaboration, it takes global scalability, it takes industry consumer engagement. They're all critical to scale circular solutions. So our audience in Europe especially definitely has to look at all these aspects. All the stakeholders and businesses, policymakers and individuals need to work together. So thank you very, very much for joining our panel. And you, thank you very much, dear audience, for tuning in. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks.